So future leaders, that's fantastic. I'm absolutely thrilled to speak to people who are going to be our future leaders. And what I find really interesting about that question is about do you know who you want to be now? And do you ever have a plan? Because everything that's happened to me really has never been part of a plan. And everything that happens, I always go, I can't believe that this is happening. Like today, I can't believe I'm here with all of you today speaking about my quest to get to space. And yeah, so I'm going to start with that. So for me, this was the most significant moment that happened in space, and I hope you future leaders will bring us to the next level of that. So I'm 5 months old when this happens. So this is obviously the moon landing, which has its 50th anniversary next year, which is interesting because I'm only 28, you know. And in my house, I grew up in a family where we're all science fiction fanatics, and the moon landing seemed to be something personal for me because my dad works in General Electric, which is an American company. So in my head, I think my dad went to the moon, but he didn't, obviously. So space is a very important part of what keeps us together and what bonds us and what we talk about. And I loved that, and it was always in my heart, and space has always been there for me. And I can't believe that I'm going to be going, after I leave here today, I'm going to be getting a train to Manchester and heading to Houston, to the Johnson Space Centre, to talk about my work as an artist and an engineer. If I'd have known that like 4 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. If I'd have known that 2 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. And that's what's incredible about when you know who you are and what you want to be, it's like everything kind of happens. Now, I call this kind of my brag reel, like, look at all the things I've done. I'm so amazing. But none of this really was part of a strategy for me. Like, I'm a speaker, I make theatre, I speak to the public, I'm on radio and television in Ireland, and I've been on all those missions that Matt's mentioned. And the common denominator is my curiosity, and that's kind of what saved me. Because for the first part of my career, I was a full-time scientist and engineer. I have 2 degrees in engineering and a PhD in science. And as much as I loved it, something was always missing for me. And I grew up in a house where my mum is a traditional Irish musician, and you're encouraged, like, get up there, Niamh, and sing a song, or get up there and tell us a story. So we were encouraged, like, to perform. So I was always kind of doing that in the background, writing plays for Christmas and for my families, and not really taking it seriously. So when I couldn't figure out where I was going in my science and engineering degree, I stepped across into the arts, and I performed for a bit. And then I went, I miss science now. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a noodle. I'm all over the shop. But rooted in all of it was my curiosity, and something was consistent in all of it. So I developed really strong skills in both the arts and science. And somewhere along the way, I kind of, after like looking through my diaries when I was a child and when I was a teenager and everything, the common denominator was I am both. And I have to find a way and a career to combine the two. And in doing that, I had a day where I was making my first theatre show, combining, you know, art and science together. And I was looking at all these different, you know, possible outcomes of my life. And it was a funny show. I was making videos of these parallel lives. And one of them was this girl who wanted to be an astronaut, which was consistently in my diaries all the way through whenever I had these crises of who I want to be. And I made a kind of a funny video. You know, I borrowed a spacesuit from the European Space Agency. But the more the video went on, I actually got really upset. And I realized this isn't frivolous. This is actually something really deep. And even though when I was a child, there was no role models hanging around Dundalk, the small town that I lived in, to help me get there, I never lost it. I never lost that dream. So future leaders, as long as you know what you're curious about, I really believe that, you know, that's the most important thing to figure out right now. What is it that really, really drives your passion? That happened in 2011. And I was still too afraid to do anything about it. And I sort of went, I'm not going to get to space. Like, look at me. I come from a country where there is no space policy. You know, we've never had an Irish person in space. I'm not going to do this. But I had to think outside the box and go, yeah, I probably will never be an astronaut, because an astronaut is a certain kind of person. While I have my degrees in engineering and science, they're nowhere near at the level that you would need to be to become an astronaut. But what I did have, I had this ability to tell stories, and I have this ability to communicate to the general public. I've been told again and again and again, I have one of those smiley faces that makes me really familiar and kind of an unusual person to talk about space that appeals to a lot of people. And I went, well, maybe that's it. So I had this bag of skills, and I went, this is the best thing that I have to offer. And so I started in 2014, and I kind of went public, expecting everybody to laugh at me. You know, what are you doing? Sit down, Niamh. Yeah, but it didn't happen. People started encouraging me, and I think they liked the idea of somebody doing something so insanely crazy that it gave them permission to be whatever they wanted to be. And I've been encouraged again and again and again, and I've been offered opportunities. My first show about my dream to go to space kind of began with this picture here, with the Earthrise picture. And that was the thing that was always consistent throughout that dream to go to space, was this picture. It was taken in 1968. And it was the first time we ever saw the Earth from a distance, and it had a profound effect on the world. It actually kicked off the environmental movement. We saw Earth as a fragile thing for the very first time, and people really wanted to take care of it. But we've kind of forgotten that, haven't we? We've kind of gotten used to seeing this picture, and we've gotten used to seeing satellite images of Earth from the International Space Station. And we're kind of getting used to astronauts as well. We're kind of getting a little bit numb to it all. So how are we going to tell that story differently? How are we actually going to make a change and actually get us to really think about how to take care of our planet? What if you put a mentor from Ireland, from a small town in Dundalk, up there, who's perfectly happy sharing how hard it is, how fragile we are, how vulnerable we are, how every second that you are away from Earth, that you have your life in your own hands? That's a story, I think, worth sharing. And that's what I'm up to. That's what I'm trying to do. I want to go up there as an artist, share everything, everything, the fear, the vomiting, everything. Because astronauts are so amazing, they protect us from all these difficult parts of space. So let me share with you some of the things that I've been fortunate to be involved in discovering our place in the universe and where we belong in that story. So firstly, beautiful planet Earth. It's gorgeous. I love it. I think it's one of the most beautiful pictures of Earth that we have, this beautiful marble. And everybody who's been up on the International Space Station will tell you, like, moment to moment, that's alive. That's alive. There's clouds moving, the oceans are rising and dropping, you can see fires, you can see everything. And every 90 minutes, of course, they get a sunrise and a sunset. I work with CIT Blackhawk Observatory, and I'm their artist in residence, and it kind of began with them. I walked into their building and I went, I want to go to space, and they went, brilliant, we'll help you. We don't know how, but sure, we'll make it happen. And they managed to help me get funding from our National Science Foundation, which is Science Foundation Ireland. And they introduced me to the whole network of the European Space Agency, who've also been very good at helping me get to know people and really tell their story. This footage here is in their neutral buoyancy tank in the Astronaut Centre in Cologne. If you're a space freak, you got to get there. It's beautiful. And this is where Alexander Gerst, the astronaut who's currently up on the International Space Station, the day I was there was actually doing his neutral buoyancy training, which is the way we prepare for space to go outside, which is an EVA. An EVA is extravehicular activity. And the more I was there, the more I went, gosh, there's absolutely thousands of people working in the space industry. I kept asking everybody, can you give it a number? Nobody can give it a number. They go, gosh, it must be like 100,000. If you take the person who makes the suit, the person that changes the dial, all the experiments, all the people planning, there's like 2 to 5 years of planning for every mission and every experiment that takes place on the International Space Station. And what's happening in the future? It's a very exciting time to be involved in space and for all of you to think about having a career in it. This is what the European Space Agency is focusing on, a moon village, putting a habitat up on the moon in order for us to understand how we can live off Earth. It's the next step from simulated missions that are happening here on Earth, and I'll explain my participation in one of them. They have a whole mission figured out, and they basically are at a stage now where they're still working on simulations and different testing and everything, but ultimately they hope in the next 10 years to put a research base on the moon, and ESA are one of the space agencies that are involved in helping that. Using regolith, which is the surface of the moon, to build up the exterior structure, and an inflatable dome on the inside for people to live in. And the reason why they're using regolith, and then they'll have a layer of water, is to protect us from radiation. We don't have any, we have very small amounts of radiation here on Earth because of our beautiful atmosphere. Once you leave Earth, that's gone. So, you know, again, we're not supposed to be off Earth. And the nearest place we've been to is the moon. Look how close it is in relation to the other planets, and that's not even to scale. You know, it takes 8 minutes for the light of the sun to reach us, and look where we are on that scale, and it takes about 5 hours for it to get to Neptune all the way out. We have a long way to go in space exploration. And of course, the next mission everybody's talking about is getting to Mars. And I would love to go there to tell everybody what it's like and come back. At the moment, with current technology, it takes 7 months to get to Mars, and we can only go every 2 years because of the different orbits that Earth has around the Sun in comparison to Mars. And on my quest to get to space, I've met some people along the way who invited me to join with them on their simulated mission for a Mars habitat residency. And I was there as their artist and their documentarian there, and also helping in my capacity as scientist and engineer. And you see there down in the bottom left-hand corner, that was the habitat. So just to ask you a few questions, is there oxygen on Mars? No, there isn't. So every time you go outside, you have to suit up, even though there is oxygen on Mars. But when you run a simulation, you live as if you are on Mars. The reason for it is that we know so little about what it would be like to live on another planet. We can't simulate gravity, obviously. Martian gravity is 1/3 that of Earth's, so you kind of have to play with that. But you can simulate wearing a spacesuit every time you go outside. You can simulate having limited food, you can simulate having limited water, and you can simulate having limited power. And they were the conditions of our simulation. And we were there conducting a number of experiments, how to 3D print, bricks if you were going to build a wall on Mars, and also how to grow food on Mars. And I was really there to share the story with the world. And I get asked again and again and again to share the story, and I'm absolutely privileged to do it. These were my analog astronauts, were called, analog being simulated. Geologists, astrobiologists from Slovakia, Israel, France, Australia, and then little old me. And it was only 2 weeks, and it was funny, it had a profound effect on my life. It has completely changed my water usage and the whole way I live my life. Because once you have limited water and limited food, you really start to appreciate what you have here on Earth. One of the nights, Roy, the geologist, went into his bedroom and he brought out money. And it was only 6 days that we were in. We're going, money. It had no meaning. 6 days had no meaning. And yet here, like cup of coffee, £2, sandwich, £5, everything is about money. But Mars is not going to be money. Or maybe there will when we have a society. So simple things like that. That's the habitat. Habitat is a fancy word for a house. And this is 2 stories. So you go in the door and it's the engineering part of it. And, it's where you suit up. And then upstairs, this is the living quarters. Everybody is always interested in the living quarters. That's it. It's an obvious looking kitchen. It's not the worst kitchen. And then the seating area is where we would have done our work, as, in computers and stuff. And this is my bedroom. More like a kind of a broom cupboard, for want of a better word. It was 2 meters wide and about 3 meters long. I brought 2 pairs of trousers and 4 tops. And since then, I have never bought a piece of clothing new. I buy all my clothing from a consignment shop, including this. It just doesn't seem to, it's just changed everything. So that's upstairs, and the food we ate was freeze-dried. So we ate freeze-dried egg. You'd add water to everything. The really important part of the mission really was when you would suit up, because that would really feel like the reality of being on Mars. And it was difficult. It was very claustrophobic. And what I loved about the place is it's quite old, so everything's scratched and broken. So half the day would be gone trying to fix things before you'd even go out on your EVA or your external. And then you go outside, and it's really hard to negotiate the ground. Some days it's wet, so it's really slushy. And I had a load of camera equipment with me. And this helmet is incredibly heavy, and you have this backpack, and it's all made of steel, so it's chafing into your neck. And we're only out for 4 hours a day because that's the way the fans work. They only have 4 hours long. You've really poor visibility. You have to take care of each other. On top of that, you're trying to, drive one of these to go to an area to collect geology samples or to discover a certain area. I have a fear of heights. I had a fear of heights. I got over it when I was here because everybody else was jumping up hills and I had to keep up with them. This footage here is one of the first few days that I was there, and you can see that I'm kind of a little bit trepidatious on the ground. The experience changed everything. It changed my perception of how much we waste water. How all you really need to do is just take care of each other, put the needs of everybody else before yours, and everybody gets on. The second you get selfish, you have arguments and you have rows. Even living there for 2 weeks, hundreds of miles from everybody else, was incredibly difficult. Imagine doing that on the moon or on Mars. And even if we fell, it was fine. But if you fell on Mars and you nicked your suit, it's curtains, So that was really interesting. And then I went to Baikonur, and I saw a launch of Alexander Gerst, as I was saying. And there he is here heading off. I'd never been to a launch before either. And Baikonur is in Russia, which is steeped in history. I got so excited during this launch. Watch what happens. My video skills were just appalling. Hello, man. reminded me how incredibly dangerous it is to put anybody in something that fast. It's moving all over the place in kind of 3D motion, and it's really hard to keep on track of the fact that there's actually a human being up there. And of course, they're going to the International Space Station where there's zero gravity. So another test to myself, can I actually withstand microgravity? So I went on a zero gravity flight in Russia, in Star City, and I don't have to hold on to the bar. I don't know why I did that. It was kind of like, you know, you're learning to swim, and you'll see people behind me doing loads of tumble turns and stuff, and I just stuck to the bar because I'm a safety girl. But it was an incredible experience. It was brilliant. It's called the Vomit Comet because you do these different procedures where you go from twice the force of gravity to no gravity, or you're just in a falling position. And thankfully, I didn't throw up, and I was really glad about that because I had the camera on myself, and I said, I told you from the start, I'll do whatever it takes to share how difficult it is, this whole space business. But actually, it was brilliant. I laughed my head off, but I was also terrified the whole time. So it's kind of like one of those things where you're really proud after the fact, but during it is absolutely terrifying. This was the most terrifying one. The guy to my left won his place because he's the fittest guy in Hungary or something, and he has a sick bag there in his right hand, right beside me. That was our second manoeuvre, and we did 10 manoeuvres, and he started throwing up after the second one and did not stop. God love him. So he was kind of pushed up to the top, and they have a sick bag, and that's it. You're told, you know, go up to the top. But yeah, and I'm exhilarated, and I sort of feel, yeah, and I have to come back and I have to share it. That's the most important part. It's not having these experiences, but telling you that it's incredibly hard. It's exciting, and it's a great time to be alive, where the space industry is just developing and growing. But we as human beings are not supposed to be on another planet. We're supposed to be here. We were born for here. And so we have to take care of this planet. And ultimately, what I would ask you to think about for your own careers is always be curious and really challenge your perceptions of yourself in the world. We are always in space. So right now we're in the Tate Modern, even though we're not supposed to be online. And here in the Tate Modern, and you know, we're here in the United Kingdom, and that's part of Europe. And that is part, obviously, of the planet Earth. And if you can remember that as I take you through these very short slides. So think of yourself still here in the Tate, and now you're on Earth, and we keep zooming out. And Earth, we know, is one planet in our solar system. We're still in the Tate Modern, okay? And all of that has a star system around it called the solar interstellar neighborhood. And all of that is grouped together in the Milky Way, 100,000 light years away from us right now in the Tate Modern. And that's one galaxy of hundreds of other galaxies, grouped as local galactic groups, Virgo superclusters, grouped into local clusters, and all of that is part of the observable universe, 46.6 billion light years away from us right now. And we are part of that. I ask you, challenge your perceptions, surround yourself with people who challenge you, keep changing the way you live and the way you see the world, and I promise you, you will get to where you want to be if you remember to stay curious. Thank you.